Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual program, Road to Roses, John Ralston and Black Football Players at Stanford, hosted and organized by the Stanford Historical Society. I'm Julia Hartung and a longtime member of the program committee. In fact, I just celebrated 15 years of service on this committee with my wonderful group of volunteers who are dedicated to bringing Stanford history to life. I'd like to give a special shout out to two of them who helped put this program together, Anne-Marie Crow, who I will bring on in a moment, and John Gifford, who we have to thank for that great opening video and all the slides that you'll enjoy in this program. I want to extend a special thanks to those of you who are members of the Historical Society. Your support makes these webinars and our other important historical resources possible. As our members know, the Society is an independent, volunteer-driven organization devoted to the scholarship and sharing of Stanford history, and we rely heavily on membership dues and donations to keep our work going and to provide the content such as what you'll be hearing today. So if this is your first exposure to the Historical Society, we hope you will consider joining. You can do that at our website, historicalsociety.stanford.edu. Before we get started, I hope you'll indulge a brief personal reflection. I think 15 years gave me some nostalgia today. As I thought about the many programs I've had the privilege of being part of over the years, and this is emerging as a favorite, I have to say, it struck me that each program has its own unique origin story. The genesis of this one is worth sharing. In late 2019, shortly after John Ralston's death, I received a phone call from Phil Satry, class of 71, and a member of both Rose Bowl teams with whom I've had the privilege with his wife, Jennifer, of working over the years in my role in the Office of Development. He wanted to know what Stanford was doing in the area of leadership development for our undergraduate students, as he was interested in exploring whether something could be started in honor of the coach from whom he learned, and I imagine many of you in this webinar learned so much about leadership. Fortunately, the timing proved to be perfect, and we were able to start the John Ralston Stanford Leadership Program this year. We're in pilot phase right now, and students are actively contributing to the learnings, and next year we plan to expand that significantly. In the course of learning about John Ralston and his coaching tree and his vast legacy, Phil shared this other aspect of what John had contributed to Stanford, his recruitment of Black athletes along with his other coaches. And I couldn't help but think that this was a chapter in Stanford's history waiting to be told. The wonderful panel you see here today is the result of that, and we are thrilled to present it to you today. With that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to my good friend, fellow development colleague, and fellow Historical Society volunteer, Anne-Marie Crow, Senior Director of Major Gifts at the School of Medicine, who will introduce our moderator, Troy Clardy, who will in turn welcome our wonderful panelists. Anne-Marie?
Thank you so much, Julia. I'm Anne-Marie Crow, and as an emeritus board member and a longtime member of the Historical Society's program committee, it is truly a distinct honor to be a co-leader of today's event, which is really very close to my heart. I too had the trajectory of my life changed when John Ralston recruited my father, Arnie Crow, out of a little San Ynez Valley High School in Solvang, California, to play football at Stanford. 25 years later, I had the great honor of working on a number of projects with Coach Ralston, Gene Washington, and Stanford's first Black head football coach, Denny Green, as I broadcast Denny's first season for KZSU and worked full-time in athletics after graduation. Stanford football remains a huge part of my life today and one of my greatest passions. And I, like so many others, have Coach Ralston to thank for that. We are truly blessed today to be joined by our moderator, Troy Clardy. As a class of 97 alum, Troy has more than 2 decades of experience creating compelling content and connections in the world of sports. He has worked for media giants from ESPN to the Pac-12 network and to our very own KZSU. Troy cares deeply about the relationships behind the athletes and programs that he covers, which is part of what makes him a perfect moderator for our very thoughtful conversation today. It's my most sincere pleasure to welcome Troy.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much. And it's truly an honor to be a part of this, honor to be asked by the Stanford Historical Society to help facilitate this. And as part of the celebration of Black History Month and the 50-year anniversary of John Ralston's final Rose Bowl team for Stanford, you can see those guys taking the field right behind my left shoulder with John Ralston leading the way. I'm honored to be a part of an event that recognizes, celebrates, and preserves Black history, which are three things that are even more important now, perhaps, than ever. John Ralston's term as Stanford's head coach went from 1963 to 1971, and that kind of perfectly dovetails with an incredible era, a fascinating era, fascinating point in time where you had unrest on the national level, unrest on the Stanford campus, and a revolutionary time for Stanford football that really changed the course of that program and sent the Indians, as they were known back then, to Pasadena. Yep. Twice, where they won, both times. Love to see that, as always. So let's get into it with the first of our three panelists, Al Wilburn, who arrived at Stanford in the fall of 1963, which was John Ralston's first year as Stanford's head coach. During his time with Stanford football, the team started to show some signs of what was to come. And on the field, Wilburn was a team captain by the time he arrived at his senior year at Stanford, and was also a pretty mean defensive end, as you can see there on a couple of the slides that we have for you. Off the field, he was named the Al Masters Student Athlete of the Year for 1966-67, and after Stanford became a very successful physician in Southern California and later back in his home Fresno area. A pleasure to welcome in to the program Al Wilburn. Al, thanks a bunch. Good to see you. How you doing today?
I'm fine, and thank you very much for having me on the program. Very much appreciate being here.
You bet. It's certainly an honor to be able to catch up with you and talk about this subject here with you. Let's start here with you. You were born in East Texas, but you moved to Madera, just outside of Fresno, in the Valley, San Joaquin Valley in Central California. You moved to Madera largely for educational and social and financial reasons. Take us on that road, your experiences in Madera and how they perhaps set you on your course to Stanford.
Okay, thanks. My parents were farmers in East Texas, up near the Oklahoma border, not too far from Arkansas also. And I think my parents are two of the most intelligent people I've ever known, but they only got to the 8th grade because there was no high schools for Black people in that part of Texas. There was no integrated high schools. I'm the fourth of 5 children. My oldest brother is 9 years older than I am, and my oldest sister is 7 years older than I am. So when I got ready to go to the 1st grade in that one-room schoolhouse from the 1st to the 8th grade, my older brother had already done the 8th grade once. My father was just adamant, worried that his children would not be able to obtain an education as his wife, my mother, and he had not been able to obtain. So they sold the farm. They sold the farm and moved to Madera, which is an agricultural part of California, so the kids would be able to go to school. We all, of course, got to school, got to high school, and all of us have gone to college. And that was having to do with my parents' foresight and their knowledge that their kids needed to have a chance for an education, which they were not going to have in that part of Texas in 1950. We moved out here in 1950, before the Brown versus Board of Education law was passed. Supreme Court verdict was passed. We all went to college. And someone asked me earlier, how did it feel when John Ralston and other coaches came to my house to recruit me for Stanford? I had worked really hard as a student. I got straight A's from the 7th grade through high school, through the senior year. I was valedictorian.
Mm-hmm.
I was the California Board of the Year in California Scholarship Federation. But I had not dreamed of going to Stanford, except there's a doctor friend of ours in town who had come to Stanford and encouraged me to think about it. When Ralston and those coaches showed up in my house, in my living room, to invite me to go to Stanford with a scholarship, but it was the fruition of my parents' dreams. Not only was I going to be able to go to college, but I was going to go on a scholarship. And somebody was asking me, the coach was asking me to go to not only college, but one of the best universities in the world. So it was like prayer come true, dreams coming true. It was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. I remember that day. I see the pictures. I see them in my living room. I see my parents, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I appreciate Ralston for starting to recruit Black people,
Mm-hmm.
Black athletes. He had the foresight to do that. There were a lot of Black athletes were ready to go. We had the academics, we had the smarts. Nobody was asking us to come to Stanford in any kind of group numbers until Ralston got there. There was one Black athlete with a scholarship before mine. He came in 1961, I think, part of the class of 65.
Mm-hmm.
Morrison Warren, but he got injured and didn't get to play very much. So my group got there. When I got there, I was the only one in the class, actually, that came on a scholarship initially as a freshman. By that spring of 64, I came in 63, by the spring of 64, there were other athletes there. John Guillory had come on, Dale Rubin had come. And so you could see things were changing, and things just got better and better.
Yeah, and you and I talked briefly a bit last week in the run up to this event, and one of the things that you mentioned that I found pretty fascinating, you mentioned that Stanford seemed to be a bit quicker to integrate on the academic side than it did on the athletic side of things, and it kind of seems that maybe in other parts of the country, maybe that was a reverse process. It was the other way around. Kind of take us through that a little bit.
Okay. Now they integrated, but they didn't integrate in mass numbers.
Right.
Morrison's class he came in 61. There were 5 Black students in his class, 2 males. One was from Africa, and he was, of course, from the United States. The class before mine, which was a class of that came in 62, had 7 Black people in it. No students came with a scholarship, no Black scholarship. I like to say that Roger Clay was in that class, but it was not recruited. He walked on later and made the team and then got a scholarship. My class came in 63. There was 11 people in that class, 11 Black students in that class. And I was the one with the scholarship. The next class after that there was more and more. I think there was 15 or 20 Black kids in the class of 68. And of course, Gene Washington came in the class of 69 and blew everything up.
We'll talk to Gene in just a couple of moments or so. As mentioned when we were introducing you here, you were team captain by your senior season. What did it mean to you to be a team captain?
It was a great honor. I often reflect on things in the past. I think I spent a lot of my time thinking about the past. And I didn't realize the significance of that at the time. I knew it was an honor. I felt honored. It was just something that I didn't think was coming. I didn't know that I was going to be the one chosen to be a captain. I didn't necessarily feel that I was worthy, but I was glad that somebody else thought I was worthy. And it was one of the biggest honors I ever had as an athlete. It was a great, huge honor. And I thank Coach Ralston and Coach Walsh and Coach Emile and Coach Rust and Coach White. All those were great, great coaches. I really appreciated them.
Vermeil, Rust, Walsh, Mike White. I feel like I've heard those names before in a professional sense. We'll get more with Al Wilburn when we bring him back for our group discussion in just a few minutes or so. But let's move on and bring in our second panelist. He has been called the catalyst for Stanford football in the 1960s. Gene Washington came to the farm as a quarterback from Long Beach Poly down in Southern California. As there you see him, number 18, bottom row. And hey, who's that 84 guy in the second row along with them? It's Al Wilburn. Just talk with him too. By the end of his collegiate career, he was a dynamic wide receiver, a big play guy that just ripped open defenses time and time again, especially during the 1968 season. After Stanford, Gene was a first-round pick of the San Francisco 49ers, had a terrific career with them, starting with his rookie year in 1969, named All-Pro 4 times, named to the Pro Bowl 4 times, and had a pretty neat little career after, and maybe even during his playing career, a little acting, a little TV, but also the NFL's director of football operations from 1994 to 2009, and also worked in Stanford's athletic department as well. A real pleasure to bring in Gene Washington. Gene, it's great to see you and have you on board with us. How you doing?
Terrific. This is so much fun listening to this and the reminiscences of the Stanford days. And I mean, it was a person like myself, a football player, growing up in Southern California. You were supposed to, if you were good, you were supposed to go to SC or UCLA. So when I decided to go to Stanford, and my cousin, let me say this, my cousin Willie Brown was an All-American at USC. Mm-hmm. So everybody thought that, of course, you're going to go to SC, your cousin's an All-American, yada, yada, yada. And Ralston was a great recruiter. So when I visited the Stanford campus, I said, this is where I'm coming to school. This is where I want to be at Stanford. And I called up John McKay and told him I wasn't coming to SC, I'm going to Stanford. He said, what? You doing what? I said, yep, that's where I'm going. And George Beeler was from Whittier, California. We were the two top football players in Southern California, the two top, and we both decided to go to Stanford. And McKay just went off. So that was, really kind of a part of Ralston recruiting in Southern California. And that sort of helped it along. And Tony Hill came after me and so forth. But I think our group sort of got that started with people from Southern Cal that SC and UCLA wanted and decided to go to Stanford.
Yeah. There's certainly no doubt about that. And as mentioned, you began your your Stanford collegiate career as a quarterback in 1966, shifted to wide receiver. What went into that whole entire situation for folks who might not be aware?
Okay. So a lot of people probably won't remember the name Chuck Williams. He was a quarterback and he might have been a JC transfer. Wasn't a tall guy, but had a great arm. So Chuck Williams was at Stanford, and I was there. And Coach Ralston said to me, I think it was like the week before the first game or something. He said, Gene, we need to have you on the field in a different position at wide receiver. And we put Chuck at quarterback, and we think we would be a better team if he was a quarterback and you were a wide receiver. And see, you have to remember, in those days, college Black quarterbacks who were going into the NFL were changed from quarterback to receivers going into the NFL. Sandy Stevens from Minnesota, some others, I think a number of them. So Black quarterbacks in college weren't going to the pros as quarterbacks. They were shifted to defensive backs or wide receiver. So knowing that, I said to myself, well, I'm going into the NFL. I hope to go into the NFL. I'm going to be a receiver, a defensive back anyway. Why not do it now? And that's what happened. That's what I did.
Yeah, Marlon Briscoe is a name that comes to mind as well, especially in the late 60s with the Buffalo Bills. Right. 68 big game at Cal. By that point, you'd established yourself as a tremendous weapon for Stanford, and you came off the field, and Stanford fans in Berkeley were chanting, "We love Washington! We love Washington!" What did that mean to you?
I love Plunkett. Wasn't Plunkett the quarterback then? Yeah, yeah, they might have been saying that, but I was thinking about the quarterback, the guy who threw the ball. So I couldn't guess anything. I didn't have a terrific quarterback. Chuck Williams had a good arm, a really good arm, but Jim Plunkett is off the charts, off the charts. And the other thing, a lot of people don't remember, I think, the players on that team, my senior year, with George Beeler and Malcolm Snyder and myself, those are three players. I was drafted in the first round. George Beeler and Malcolm Snyder were drafted in the second round. I mean, that wasn't happening at Stanford, but it was beginning to happen. So, we could go up against anybody, SC, UCLA, SC, when they had the great teams. OJ was there. They beat us at Stanford, I think, by 3 points.
Yep.
So Stanford was like on the road to great things. And I think that was kind of the beginning of it. And John Ralston was the key. There's no question about it. No question.
Yeah. No question. We'll get more into that in a moment or so. But with what you did, with what you represented as a black football player at Stanford, and at that time on the campus nationwide, did you ever feel that you didn't just represent Stanford, that you didn't even just represent yourself, but that you also represented even more than that?
In some respects, yes. I mean, you kind of understand what was going on socially and politically around the country. So as Stanford and the Ivy schools were way ahead of everybody else. Princeton was in that direction. Harvard was going in that direction. So the Ivy League schools were going in that direction in terms of integration. And not only integration in the school, but in the fraternities, sororities, or eating clubs. At Princeton, they had eating clubs, and they had some black students in the eating clubs. At a lot of places, you were a black student, you weren't going to be in a fraternity unless you were in a black fraternity, not a white fraternity. And as I recall, I think the Delft House, I was at the Delft House at Stanford, they went local so that they could decide whom they wanted in the fraternity, whether it was black or white. So there were a number of things going on at Stanford. When I was recruited as a black student on the campus, you could participate in the entire experience, including fraternities, but you couldn't do that at a lot of places.
Interesting stuff. More with Gene Washington coming up in a bit when we bring everyone in for the group discussion. But our third panelist is the guy they call Shocker. He also escaped from John McKay's clutches as he grew up in Southern California, went to LA high school, played on the varsity level at Stanford from 1969 to 1971. There he is, gashing the Air Force Falcons. And while Jim Plunkett passed his way to the Heisman Trophy in 1970, Shockley was Stanford's leading rusher that year, including 3 touchdowns against Arkansas in the season opener. The dynamic duo with Shockley, number 38, and Jackie Brown, his teammate, number 33. Boy, they did a lot of damage to a lot of teams, especially in that 1970 season. The guy they call Shocker is our third panelist for this afternoon. Shocker, thanks a bunch. How you doing today? It's great to see you.
I'm well, thank you.
And great to have you on board with us. And Gene kind of hinted at it a little bit with USC and just how big they were back in those days.
Mhm.
I want to take you back to 1969, a close loss to the Trojans that year. How did that loss in 1969 set the table for what we saw the next 2 years, including the game, the slides we're watching now, October 10th, 1970? How did that loss in 69 set the table for what we saw for Stanford the following 2 years?
Well, a story that we know but hasn't been told. When we lost that game with no time on the clock, Ron Ayala kicked the field goal, and I believe that was our best team. We could have ran the table. We could have gotten 3 Rose Bowl wins with that team we had, but it didn't happen. We were all laying down on the field crying when the ball went through the upright. And we became the Vow Boys, me, JB, and Seaman, and everybody. We said, we're not going to lose to SC or UCLA ever again. And we didn't. We didn't get publicity. All we did is we had a solemn determination that we were going to win it all. And we were a wonderful group of people. And then on top of that, we had great athletes. And what we had was unity, which puts it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we were so resilient. And of course, we had the great Jim Plunkett, and after that, Don Bunce, rest his soul, who was, he was great. He was a rugby player, and he had, he was mobile, he'd run, and he just had a lot of grit. And, it was, we were a special group of guys. And I'm going to tell you how special we were if you give me 2 seconds.
Sure.
Or maybe a little more than 2 seconds.
The stage is yours.
I wrote, the name of this is Shock Was Shocked when he came to Stanford. When I first arrived at Stanford, I lived in the dorms at Trankel's house, Wilbur Hall. I saw 3 guys. I obviously didn't know them, but I assumed that they had to be varsity players by their sheer size. Lo and behold, when I reported to freshman practice, they were there. What? Huh? These are freshmen? I was shocked, but pleasantly surprised. I had seen Greg Sampson, Pete Lazatich, and Art Smiley. I didn't know, but I figured Art Smiley was the great Don Parrish or somebody on the varsity team, whom by the way, as you may recall, was the defensive player of the year for the Pac-8 in the 69 season. Jackie Brown, JB, and I both marveled at our prospective teammates. That makes you feel real good when you know what you got and you believe in them. They believe in you. We knew that day that something was going on at Stanford. With a talented bunch of guys with strong character, heart, and desire. And that was the beginning of our Rose Bowl ride. Get on board, everybody, in one accord, and let's take it to the Ohio State boys. That was our mantra.
And you certainly did 27-17 against the Buckeyes. We'll get more on that in a bit. It's interesting to me, though, because I stumbled across an interview that Ralston did later on with Bob Murphy later on, years later.
Definitely.
And he said that those 70 and 71 teams actually could have been national champs if the squad had made that as a goal instead of just focusing strictly on going to the Rose Bowl and winning that. That kind of surprised me a bit. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I told you that we should have won the Rose Bowl 3 times because our best team was the 69 team or the 68 team. Well, no, 69 team. And, you know, I think we were 8-2 that year. We only lost to SC in the last minute, and to I can't remember that other team right now, but we erased all the tapes after the first year when we lost. We said, okay, we're going to do a clean slate, and I was so proud of those guys. We had Jeff Seaman, and we had Bombshell and Hollywood and Gregosaurus. Boy, we had a team. I mean, I would have went to Vietnam with these guys, all right?
Black enrollment at Stanford doubled from 1968 to 1972.
Oh, yeah.
What was your sense of the change of the climate during that time, largely as a result of that?
Well, you know, we were the largest. I was in class of 68. We were the largest number of Blacks to ever go to Stanford my freshman year. And it was improving. I went to Stanford on an academic scholarship. I was a walk-on. And I decided I was going either to Columbia or one of the Ivy League schools, but I went back there and it was cold and dark in New York.
Slightly different.
And I said, I'm a California guy. Let me get my BUT back to LA. And, you know, it was the perfect fit for me because of the academics, the university campus, and all of the amenities. My thought was that Stanford, after I was a scholar athlete, and I was on a program where we visited all the universities and colleges in the state of California. When I went to Stanford, I said, "Oh, this is it. That's it." And so, you know, that was the right choice. And I didn't look at another school after that.
And it all worked out. By the way, I should note that you're the most appropriately dressed out of all of us. That's what right?
Well, I do love the big red. Okay,
there you go.
All my guys wore red. All right.
All right. Let's bring everyone in here and begin
great camaraderie.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a great sense of just how close knit. Not just your specific teams were, but perhaps everyone else from that era as we bring everybody else in as we bring in Al Wilburn and Gene Washington and begin the group discussion portion of the program. And I kind of want to start here with all three of you guys. And Al may have hinted at it here a little bit. Your first impression, your guys' first impression of John Ralston. What did you think when you first met him? And how big of an impact did he have in your guys' careers?
Well, I'll start by saying he was the best recruiter that I had ever been around. And I was recruited, blowing my heart. I was recruited by every school in the country. I could have gone to any school. And Ralston was different. He had that low voice and all that, but he just had this command that resonated. with the players, and I think it resonated with a lot of the parents also. But
Mhm.
Ralston and his assistant coaches, they were great recruiters. Great recruiters. So
I can amen that, second that. They were great recruiters. And as I said, they kind of approach you differently. I went to different schools, separate schools. I didn't get recruited by every school in the country, but I did. And the University of California School, UCLA, and Berkeley. They did have a kind of a warmth. My parents loved them, you know. Like I said, when they sat in our living room, my parents really loved them. I mean, prayers were answered. This was they were coming to help their son get ahead, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And they had the demeanor, the attitude, the approach that said that, yeah, we can take him, we can work with him, we can care for him, we can love him, and he can love us, and we can be a team here, and we'll keep you posted about him. We will take care of him, and Stanford will be great for him. And my parents believed it. I believed it. I signed the paper, and I never looked back. I thought, like Gene said, he was a great recruiter. The whole group were a great recruiter. I spoke a lot with Coach Walsh and Coach White. I thought they were all excellent recruiters with a nice, personable attitude. Ralston had this Dale Carnegie approach to life speech. I think Hillary will talk about that. But he really was convincing and a very positive attitude toward things.
What is it? What the mind can achieve, what the mind can believe, the body can achieve?
Right.
I can't do that in his voice, though. Shocker might be able to do it. I understand you do a pretty neat little.
You can't make the club in the tub.
But there's one thing I want to say about John Ralston. John Ralston is not afraid to have great assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of head coaches wouldn't do that, but he had great assistant coaches, and he wasn't afraid of that. Some coaches were afraid of having outstanding assistants because they didn't want him to kind of show them up. But I mean, you look at where those coaches that he had on his staff, look at where they went on and what they accomplished. I mean, it was amazing, not amazing, it was terrific stuff. And he recognized it, and I give him the credit for that.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame stuff, especially when you're talking about Walsh and now Dick Vermeil, who is the class of 2022 Pro Football Hall of Fame. Kind of along those lines, though, and that being said, you know, coaching Black players, I'd imagine, had to be a bit of an adjustment for Ralston and his staff. How did they handle it? Were there some things along the line that, you know, that they had to learn as far as coaching Black players were concerned?
I don't think no. I'm just going to say no, because they were interested in football players, not Black football players. They were interested in players who were going to win for them. So look at what SC and UCLA were doing at the time with Black players. Even I think the University of Washington, what they were doing with Black players. So, you know, it was a recognition of you can't survive in this league if you don't have some Black players and the speed and the ability players. So you weren't going to go anywhere. That's why in the South, Bear Bryant at Alabama finally said, "Oh, we got to get some brothers in here."
Yep. and which team gave him that revelation? USC.
Yeah. You were exactly right, and he knew that SC was going to beat him, and they took that team, I think, down to Alabama, so that he could say to his people, "We can't compete if we don't have some Black athletes." And then they Wilbur Jackson, I think Wilbur Jackson, running back, first one to come in there. But Bear Bryant knew it. The handwriting was on the wall. Different
Shocker,
time.
your thoughts on? Yeah, Shocker, your thoughts on the staff and how,
well, you know,
how
there's
they
a
handle.
there's a saying that after SC went down there with Sam the Bam Cunningham and crew, they ran over him. And after that, Bear Bryant said, "We got to get some of them boys."
There you go. There you go.
Here's the real statement. They said that Sam Cunningham did more for civil rights in Alabama than Martin Luther King.
Absolutely. And I was born in Alabama. I know what they're talking about. That's my. I was born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, with the university, but black people couldn't go to the game.
Well, since we all have a John Ralston story, this is my John Ralston story. John Ralston stories are infamous. His motivational speeches on the bus, some are more entertaining than others, but all have a familiar ring. If you know what I mean. Because we had some real characters which played on our team. John Ralston was our leader, and some of us called him JR. But that didn't stand for Junior. Although sometimes we might wonder and also be surprised. I was definitely surprised at the end of spring training in 1969. When I met with Coach to receive my spring game evaluation, and I looked him dead in the eye. He said to me, "Shock, oh, you did a great job running, blocking, and catching. And being a walk-on of your caliber, wow, Shock, you're a real prize." He said, "Now, Shock, I've only got one issue to discuss with you today." He said, "Now, Shock, where was that? Okay, I got one that I want to discuss with you today. I want to know why you take your time getting in your football stance before you hit the line." I said, "Well, Coach, I'm concentrating to explode off the ball, pick up 5 or 10 yards, and that ain't all." He said, "Okay, now, Shock, don't get me wrong now. We're very pleased the way you run that ball. Don't get me wrong." He said, "When the quarterback says hike, then you gone. But I was just wondering, Shock, in your mind, what's going on?" I said, "Coach, remember Marvin Gaye? He sang that song." He said, "Okay, Shocker, okay. I just want you to know that we're gonna play the best 11 players in the fall. No, actually, Shock, it's gonna be 22 players. We're gonna play on both sides of the ball." He said, "Shock, you're one of the best 22 to play for our team. I only have one more question to ask you, Shock." I said, "Okay. Will you switch to play linebacker instead?" I said, "Pardon me? What did you say?" "How about linebacker, Shock? You'll be terrific." "No, Coach, I don't think so." And that's the truth. He was a great guy, but he was candid with me and I was candid with him. And it all worked out in the end.
Yep. Yes, indeed. It all certainly worked out. And, for the squad to get to that 1971 Rose Bowl, we've got some visual accompaniments here. First time that Stanford had been there in a couple of decades. Plunkett, of course, already had the Heisman Trophy in hand, facing the mighty Ohio State Buckeyes and Woody Hayes. I want to get all three of your guys' thoughts on this. What did the 1971 Rose Bowl mean to you, either watching from afar for Gene and Al, let me start with you here, and playing in that game for Shocker?
Let me start. It was just jealousy as far as I was concerned. I wasn't there. I was proud of them. I love the fact that they beat UCLA and USC, which I never did on the team that I played on. And I loved that. I celebrated with them. I danced around with them. Watching them play, it was pure envy and jealousy on my part, knowing that they had worked themselves into this opportunity. I knew that progress had been made, and I was so proud to say I had played at Stanford. I mean, it really boosted my ego. I mean, I could walk around. I was going to UCLA Medical School at the time, and I could walk around and say, well, those guys kicked blank blank's butt, So it was a proud moment for me.
Gene, your thoughts?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, for Stanford to do what SC and UCLA, used to do, and what people in Southern California, they were accustomed to, and to see Stanford, this is the team that John McKay was saying, you guys are going to hit us with your purses. He said that.
Wow.
So, for a Southern California guy, for Stanford to be in the Rose Bowl and do that, man, nothing could have been better. It was phenomenal.
Shocker, what that day mean to you?
Boy, we were so ready. We were over ready. I remember, this is kind of funny, but we were practicing, and we had already won the Pac-8 at the time. So we didn't know who we were going to face for sure. But of course, it was Ohio State, the Buckeyes. And I remember when Coach Ralston said, "Gather around, guys, gather around." He said, "Guess who we're going to play on New Year's Day?" So, and I don't think it had been announced before. He said, "We're going to play Ohio State." And so I remember we looked at each other. We said, excuse my friend, "Oh, shucks." Because these guys were the real deal. And we were like on one accord. At practice, after practice, we ran our wind sprints. We ran 100. We ran 100-yard dashes, 100-yard dashes for conditioning. I was about 220, but I came down about 215. Everything was just, we're gonna be faster and harder. And we were, it was like music. It was like a symphony when we played those guys. I had told people I'm from LA, so people always say to me, my dad just say, "You want to go to the Rose Bowl, son?" I said, "No, if I go, I'll play. When I go, I'll be playing." And that was a dream come true. As a little kid, I told my daddy that. And so, but see, it was just, and that's why I love the guys so much and Coach and Jim Plunk and Jeff Seaman, all my boys. Those are my boys. We was boys, okay? You know what I mean? I know you got the Crips and the Bloods, but we had the 71 and 72 Rose Bowl, Marauders. We were bad. Everybody knew it.
Dudes.
We beat SC 3 out of the 4 years I was there, and UCLA 3 out of the 4 years I was there. We wasn't playing, and we had some great guys. I can see them now. Raising HELLO. It was a great time.
And it's amazing, it still applies even now. If you want to do big things in the conference, You gotta beat SC, you gotta beat LA, you gotta beat UCLA, and you gotta win the California sweep. And when Stanford's been able to do that, they put themselves in great positions to do things over the years. Gene, I want to start with you on this one. And I think you guys have kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I want to get deeper into it if we could. Any sense of how other teams were integrating throughout the Pac-8 and even the AAWU earlier in the 60s? Any sense, did you guys get a sense at the time of how other programs and even other schools were integrating? Were you guys taking note of that? And even back then, were you guys drawing a straight line from teams and programs that were integrating to competing for Rose Bowls?
Well, I'll jump in on that. The handwriting was on the wall.
Mm.
You weren't going to win.
Mm.
You were not going to win, period. So it took a little time, but that didn't take that long for the Big Ten, the schools in the South, Southeast to realize that. And they said, we can't compete. We cannot compete because we don't have the team speed. Some coach I remember says that speed kills. You cannot win without having speed. So the handwriting was on the wall. So just look at what happened with all of the other schools. I mean, Jerry Levias at Texas going to SMU instead of going to a black college. I mean, everything was in flux and changing at that time. So, the handwriting was on the wall that if you didn't have team speed, you weren't going to win, period.
Al, your thoughts?
When I got to Stanford in '63, the SEC was not integrated, as you know. No black players in those big schools down south. All of them were going to the Big Ten, and the Big Ten was beating up on people, and they were coming to California. So it was, you looked around and you realized after a couple of years that, as Gene just said, they were waking up to the fact that they needed to recruit black athletes no matter what color they were. You need to recruit athletes no matter what color they were. And it increased your team speed, apparently, to recruit black athletes. I talked to Walsh. Walsh voluntarily told me one time, I think I was a sophomore, he said, we're recruiting some players because we need more team speed. Mm-hmm. Dale Rubin, John Guillory, those are track guys. And they both wanted to play on the offense. But he put them on defense, along with Clay and myself, because he wanted to increase the team speed. He said, I need some people who can run and catch people. And so I need Dale Rubin back there. I need Guillory back there. You on the end, you and Clay on the end, because we need somebody who can run and catch people. So you need to increase your team speed, not only athletes, but you needed to have that team speed. And the world was waking up to that. Also, the civil rights thing was going on. This is the 60s. This is the freedom rise. This is it's being blown up in school, in churches. This was riots. This was a tumultuous time. And people were realizing that the country needed to be integrated. The Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act were both passed in 64, 65. So the whole world was awakening to the fact that Black people were here and Black people were getting integrated into all kinds of systems. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted to have a good athletic team and compete nationwide, you couldn't exclude Black athletes and then pretend that you were going to compete. That was not going to happen because the Black athletes were going to make sure it didn't happen. So, if you came up against a team that didn't have any, you made sure that you worked your ass off, that you made them aware of the fact that they needed some. They needed you, or need somebody like you. So it was a change in attitude across the whole country, across the whole world. And athletes were part of that push, part of that push to the forward. You look on what was the one joke that someone told? Only place in the South where you could cheer for a Black person chasing down a white person was on a football field. That was true. And that was all part of the integration thing. it was revolutionary, and it was extraordinary to be part of it. You could see it happening, and you felt like you were part of it, that the country was changing.
Yeah, and certainly it was a part of Stanford as well. And the last thing that I'll do here before we get into the Q&A portion, you guys were free, but as the 60s went on and turned into the 70s, there became more and more Black players with the Stanford program, and they became big time contributors as the decade went along, and even continuing in through the 70s. Who are some of the other guys from that era that particularly stand out to you? Shaka, let me start with you.
We had, our success was based on, about five different things. And that's what I was just thinking about while I was writing there, because it was the increase in Black talent, talented Black players. And you could talk about Benny Barnes, and that's the next step, is that we had more junior college transfers. There was an increase in LA. Increase at Stanford. I'm looking at John Haygood right now, who played with Gene, and there was also Bubba Brown, who was from Oxnard Community College. So it was not just the increase of quality Black players for our team, the 71-72 champions, but it was also an increase in junior college transfers, which I don't think Gene or Al had that when they played. They didn't have that they weren't fed with the junior college or the community college players. And then secondly, we had such depth. And I'm looking right here now at Demia Washington, was one of the guys who was a great player. And, but we had second and third string players. We had depth. So we had depth. We had talented Black players, talented junior college transfer players, Black and white or whatever color. And then we had the Thunder Chickens and company. And then we had the coveted Heisman Trophy win. So we were firing on all 6, 9, 12 cylinders. And if we made up our minds, you're gonna have a tough time. No, you're gonna lose. That's what's gonna happen.
You might walk in.
John Ralston could do. John Ralston could get the best out of you, even if you didn't always understand what he's doing.
You might walk into the stadium, but you might not necessarily walk out. You might need to be wheeled out of the place. And I love that picture of Don Parrish, by the way. That's just awesome stuff.
Let me say two names, please.
Yes.
Tony Hill and James Lofton.
Yeah. Yep. Couple of other wide receivers in the 70s for Stanford who did fantastic things, and often, of course, in the Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Gene Washington rests.
These are, SC one of these players. Lofton and Tony Hill coming to Stanford and not SC. That was a big deal. Kind of, disrupting that thing that McKay had for him down at UCLA and UCLA. But, you think about those players, and then went on and had great pro careers. Both of them.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
Awesome.
It's interesting you bring up Lofton, because I remember talking to him a couple of years ago, and he said originally he was thinking of going to San Jose State because he saw the 68 Olympics and on the medal stand, Juan Carlos and Tommy Smith. He saw those guys, and that's when he started to get the idea to go to San Jose State, perhaps, went to Stanford instead.
Yeah, that's because we beat San Jose State that year 68-12 or something.
And James started going, oh, wait, maybe I should go to that school up the road here a bit. We have a lot of ground that I'd still like to cover, but I still want to leave plenty of time in for the Q&A, because I know we've got a lot of great questions already in the hopper. So my thanks to you guys. I might chime in a little bit here and there going forward. Truly an honor. Thank you guys so much. Love the stories. And I know that there's so much more to come as we continue to reflect here. But for the Q&A portion, and again, I know there's a lot already in the hopper, I turn it back to Anne Marie.
I can't wipe the smile off my face. But I'm going to try to concentrate long enough to share some of these phenomenal questions that we have from our audience. And I'm going to start, we're going to start one by from Vic in the audience, and asking if any members of the panel felt any animosity by any of their fellow players or coaches because of their color, and they had that experience. How was it handled, and what was the outcome? And I guess if not, why do you think that maybe you didn't have that experience when it was happening so prevalently at other institutions?
Well, I'm going to start off and say I never had anything like that at Stanford. Nothing, nada, nothing. That's my answer.
I had no reaction like that from any of the players or the coaches. I always felt that everybody on the team was on the team, and we were all trying to work and do the best we could for the team, and was very cooperative. I had no negative feelings from any of my teammates. I had problems with my freshman roommate. He had some, I don't know, he was worried about having a black roommate. He was from Portland, Oregon, but I remember walking into the room and he was crying with his parents sitting there on the bed. And I thought they were having that last minute goodbye, and I left. Several months later, I realized that he had wanted to change roommates, and that was the only significant feeling like that, event like that occurred. And later, we became friends. We became good friends. He wrote this English paper saying, describing the most significant event in his life, and it was me being his roommate. I mean, I couldn't really relate to that, and I told him that we got along fine. We became friends by the end of the year, but that was nothing on the football team at all, because we were out there just hitting on each other. If you had some animosity, go hit the guy. Doing the tackling drills, doing the blocking drills, go hit him. And hit back, and so we all hit back. So that was if you had some animosity, you left it out there on the field, because you're getting whacked aside in the chest. There was no animosity like that.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary, did you have anything you wanted?
Well, I had a great my roommate. I love that guy, Jonathan Rice, and he was from Seattle, Washington. And when we played, it was about the same time that SC had played Alabama. Before that, we played Arkansas. And in Arkansas, before the game, and maybe I had such a good game because I was taking it out on them. When I was warming up on the field, the guy said, "Shine, number 38, shine." So I told him, "I got your shine." So me and Jackie, and so we it was a rock'em sock'em game, but I took it out on him. I ran 3 touchdowns, and so I had their shine, okay. But other than that, it was good. Great people. That was the one thing I want to say about Stanford. I learned that we had so much in common. I don't care if you're white, black, pink, or green, because the type of individuals that Stanford had a penchant for having them matriculated to school. These people were all high caliber character people. I mean, okay, don't tell me about your SAT and, you were student body president, so was I. I had such and such, I was accepted to all these schools just like you. We were all the same kind of people. People with character. And that is the biggest, I think that is the most valuable asset of the school, is the quality of the individuals that matriculate there, that attend, and it's the people. I mean, it's always, your most important asset is always your human resource.
Can I add something about the fraternity? I was asked to join this fraternity. It was called Alpha Tau Omega. It became local, became Alpha Tau Omicron. They became local in like 1960 because they had admitted a Jewish kid to the fraternity. And the Great Green Dragon down in Alabama, something said, you can't have a Jews in your fraternity. So they kicked them out. They came back a year later to see if they got rid of the Jewish guy. When they came back a year later, they had a black guy along with 2 or 3 other Jewish guys in the fraternity. And so it was a local fraternity that I joined. And they were very, I want to shout out to ATO, that they were very supportive and very positive with me. Thank you.
There was a few people who actually asked questions about that and reflected on that in their own experience, Al. And I know, Jean, for my own, I have a lot of great DELT stories that I won't share in today's session because
please don't share those.
to protect the nameless. However, I know that was certainly a factor in Delta Tau Delta, as well as Art Harris and others helped to integrate DELT nationally as well.
What Al said is very, very interesting, and I think it's prophetic in terms of what this whole life experience is really all about. You saw the guy who initially it was traumatic for him to have a black roommate, but he learned from it and he became better. That's what the experience is about. And when I think about whatever happened or didn't happen on the football field or with whatever, I realized that at the time, and I'm 50 years older now. No, 50, am I 50 years old? Yeah, I am. I realized that we were all just doing the best we could at the time.
Well, isn't that a thread that pulls through to today, right? I think there's a lot of conversation about that. I think building on that a little bit, we've kind of alluded to this, but some of the audience would like to hear a little bit more about if campus and national politics really had any effect on the team and players and coaches, and if you felt compelled to take a stand as a Black athlete or as a member of team. Did you ever feel intimidated to take such a stand because you may have had to feel like you had to put the team first, so to speak?
Well, it's not about putting the team first. It has to be first in your heart, period. You don't put something first. You have to be won over and influenced by the good that you can extract from the experience. And that's what made us, I was telling them, we were tighter than a couple, and connected better than a couple of Siamese twins. We were tight, we were thick as thieves. Listen, you didn't want to mess with us. That's the kind of team we had. And that's what, that's how the coach, I was gonna say Coach taught us. He said, the idea is, you don't throw, you protect your buddy. And it was just I'm gonna try to pull up some pictures, some old photos. I had a party at my place in 2000, the first time we went back to the Rose Bowl. We didn't win. And all the
Ron
guys came. All of them. And it was more fun. It was like dying and going to heaven, but you didn't have to die.
It's
that
interesting.
was the kind of love and unity we had on our team. And that's what made us exceptional on and off the field.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up that 2000 Rose Bowl, and the head coach for Stanford at that time, Tyrone Willingham, the second of three Black head coaches that Stanford has had, started with Denny Green in 1989.
That's right.
And of course, leading up now to David Shaw, who is now the all-time winningest head coach in Stanford football history. Gene, I'd love to start with you on this one. What is the fact that Stanford has had 3 Black head coaches and 3 successful Black head coaches mean to you?
Well, I mean, go ahead. Who's talking? Go ahead, please.
Well, it's leadership. I mean, Stanford has for a long time been a leader in a lot of areas, tons of areas, and they were leaders in that regard. So I'm so proud of what Stanford has done over the years and all kinds of issues. And Stanford, to me, has been a leader, not a follower.
That's right.
And Stanford, to me, sort of took the mantle from the Ivy schools and exceeded them in terms of progressive thinking, in my view.
Here. I agree.
So, and then see the Ivy, great schools, but mediocre athletics, except maybe a little basketball every now and then. But Stanford was in the big time. So this Stanford is the Ivy schools in the big time athletics. So to me, that's just one of the phenomenal things about Stanford. Able to be this great institution and then also compete athletically with anybody, period.
The issue you brought up was about how national politics impinged upon the team. Did national politics impinge upon the team or affect team relationships? And I think we all agree that it really did not. My cousin is Tommy Smith. Tommy Smith is my cousin. He went to San Jose State. And he's the one on the 1968 Olympics who raised that black fist. We were both born on the same, about a mile from each other, on the same dirt road in East Texas. And we both came to California about the same time, about 5 or 6, 7 years old. So and Tommy caught hell for that gesture, but that gesture I fully supported. And his book, relates that. But that kind of national politics never did seem to become part of a team ethic. It wasn't something I felt compelled to do. I surely understood why Tommy did it, and I supported him.
Absolutely. I think about, and I'm going to get these pictures, but I think about, what said it all, or what says it all, is the kind of unity that you can have. It's the most beautiful thing, and it's so powerful. When it was 2000 when they went back to the Rose Bowl, and I had a party, and everybody came. All the coaches, all the people who were, Doc in the physical, in the equipment room, the Scotty and Dave and the therapy. I think even the team physician, Dr. Bailey, everybody came. That was like, it was, you just couldn't, there were no words. And we had, and see, it's that, there's a saying, I don't want to go there in the Bible, but it talks about the unity, how powerful unity is. And that's the key to a team. And guess who was the energizer for all of that? JR. Come on, man.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
circling back to that, Hillary, one of the questions Tim Ferguson, our audience, shared was about circling back to JR's coaching style, and he's shared that he felt that Ralston was known as being hyper competitive, and that some people, especially at USC, did not appreciate that. And later, Jim Harbaugh, as we all know, maybe had the same rep after the What's Your Deal game. What was, in the light of that, heightened competitiveness, what was Ralston's take on sportsmanship, and how did he illustrate the balance of the value of being highly competitive yet gracious in victory?
Well, are you ready to die, man? Come on, are you ready? I'll be ready to die. You gotta love him or laugh at him or both. And it's a good feeling. It's all good. Everybody meant well. Now we got to do well.
Isn't it amazing how people call Stanford over competitive the moment that they realize that they can't push Stanford around anymore? Have you guys noticed that as well? Or just me?
Now, what was that? They said Stanford is what? What was?
I didn't hear you.
You said
it was hyper
competitive.
competitive, that Coach Ralston had a reputation of being hyper.
Hey, they say, I don't mean to cut you off, but you better get hyped. You better get hyped, okay? That's the game of football. Get hyped, buddy. If you don't get hyped, go back in the locker room. This is war, huh? This is war, y'all.
But to me, to go along with that, and whatever you say as the coach, you better have some good players.
Oh, yeah.
So you can say all you want to say and do all that, but you better have some good assistant coaches and
That's
some
right.
great players.
That's right.
And he got some great players at Stanford. Ralston got great players at Stanford. Not just black players, but all great players.
That's absolutely right. And he had great coaches. You know, Mike White. This was so beautiful. When we had our 50th Rose Bowl reunion, I saw Mike White, and Mike, you're supposed to be. I was trying to get him to. I think he's on this Zoom, and Mike White. Mike White was a great coach and everything else, but during our era. Because we were so close, like a family, and families have their squabbles, and so Mike White, we said Mike White, and so Mike White's listening right now, and I told Mike White that we used to call you Dog White, and I said I tell you why, because you be talking behind people's back, and this is what a lot of us do, because we become so close, it was like family. Yeah. And I could tell him 50 years later, and he laughed at it when I called him Dog White, because that's what we called it. Now that's team. That's a family.
Al, I want to get into something with you really quickly, and I know Hillary brought this up a little bit. Stanford didn't go back to the South a whole lot during that era. They did in 1970, and they dropped all those points. Shocker dropped 3 touchdowns on the Razorbacks with the whole nation watching, and that was the launching pad for Jim Plunkett that year. But your 1965 squad, Al, went down to Tulane. What do you remember from that trip?
I remember that we were concerned about possible racism. Well, not possible racism. We were concerned about results of the racism. One of my fraternity brothers was from Louisiana, New Orleans. And I said, where can we go in New Orleans? He said, no place I know. He said, I can't tell you some places to go because I got to go back down there and live. So he wasn't going to tell us about any places that, there were no places that you could go actually as a mixed group. We won the game. Mm-hmm. I remember that there was some concern about it. We had a team like gathering the evening we got there, and we had a team gathering in someone's home. And so all these black and white players on our little red coats and everything in this person's home. And it felt uncomfortable because it seemed like they were uncomfortable having that many black kids, black guys in their class, in their home. It's only like that, maybe 6 or 7 of us out of that team in that. We won the game. I also remember that coach said that putting a curfew on you guys, don't leave your room after 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, be in your room. And we all sneaked out. Coach White sneaked out, Ruben, Hillary, myself, Clay, we all sneaked out in our red coats. It was New Orleans, man. Right? It was New Orleans. Right? We were only going to be there for that night. We sneaked out. I opened my door and I saw all the doors down the hall. All the players opened their doors, looking out, and we all sneaked out. And we roamed around New Orleans for a couple of hours. Got back on the bus the next day, and we got back to Stanford. He ran the hell out of us. He ran us for miles as a punishment. But we won the game. We felt like we needed to celebrate. We hadn't been to New Orleans before. Mike White ran the miles with us because he had broken a little rule also. But I remember the feeling that somehow things were changing, but they had not changed enough that we could feel free in this person's house, or in that we could feel free in town, because town is pretty well open. But it was an odd feeling. You felt things were changing, but had not yet changed.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim asked the question about diversity within the coaching staff, and you actually had one Black coach on the coaching staff. We've talked about how revered and how many of your coaches actually have coached in Super Bowls and in the NFL, but was that something that at that time was noticeable, that there was an African-American coach on the staff?
There was no African-American coach on the team I played in.
Okay.
Played with.
We had Moultrie, was it?
Yes.
Name Moultrie?
Yeah. I was just going. Yeah, Moultrie was with me. I was wondering if with Gene, Moultrie came after you, right, Gene? Because you don't remember Moultrie. He was
He might have came my senior year. He might have been there my senior year. Maybe I'm somewhere in there, but I remember him integrating the coaching staff, as I recall.
Yeah. But he was the coach for us in my year. Mm-hmm.
One more question posed by several of the attendees is that, what are your thoughts on, we've talked a little bit about how Stanford fell behind a few of our rivals in its revelation to start actually recruiting Black athletes. Do you think that football was a gateway to integration at Stanford, or was integration a gateway to better the football teams?
Wait a minute, look, I got to interject this. That Stanford was behind whom?
Well, that, as you alluded to, Gene, SC and UCLA, for example, had more Black athletes before Stanford did. And so I think the question was, once finally Stanford was not too far behind on the heels of that, but once they did you see, we talked in some of our other sessions about the composition of the campus itself. Al, you shared a really moving story previously about a moment you were on the quad and looked around, and maybe you could share that with the group. But the question is, do you think it's kind of the chicken or the egg? Did football help integrate Stanford, or was it the other way around?
Who's answering that? I think football.
Anyone.
I think the school was being integrated. The school was integrated, but in very small numbers. I think that when they started bringing in football players, it helped increase the numbers just because you were bringing in football players. When I started there in 1963, my freshman year started in 1963, I was the only player on the freshman football team. But the next spring of 64, John Guillory had transferred in. Dale Rubin had transferred from University of California, Berkeley. And there was other players. Ron Miller came in the fall of that year. So they brought in, and in my class, there were 11 Black people, including me. So there was 10 non-athletes, non-scholarship athletes, and me. By the end of that 63 into 64, there were at least 4 more athletes, Black people on campus. Within the next couple of years, I mean, I could walk around campus all day and not see another Black person in my freshman year, another Black person. By the time I became a junior, I mean, that's the story you're talking about. I could stand in the middle of the quad, on one side of the quad, and I did that. I looked around and I was shocked. I saw Black people in every corner of the quad. And that was the difference. And I believe that through Ralston's attitude of wanting more players and wanting more Black players, wanting more good athletes, that helped bring in more Black students. All the Black athletes, by the way, were highly intelligent, well-motivated, graduated. I mean, the guys on my team, I mean, there's doctors, lawyers, PhDs, and it was just any thought that somehow Black athletes were not intellectually capable of matriculating through Stanford was bullshit. It was just absolutely bullshit. And the athletes proved it by going on to do fantastic, great things, graduating. So, but I think that Ralston, working with the whole attitude at Stanford, admitting people, I think that helped loosen things up. I can't say definitely, but I definitely think it helped loosen things up. And pardon me for cussing.
The last 2 years have driven me to cuss a lot more. So
Let me one thing I want to say is that some of you may remember Arthur Harris, the basketball player.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh yeah.
LA. That was one of the pivotal to me time from Stanford. Arthur Harris was a great basketball player. Went on and played at the NBA, and he was at Stanford. And when I was recruited to Stanford, Arthur Harris was already there, and that to me that was a big deal. So Stanford was doing things that other places weren't necessarily doing. When I say other places, the academic caliber of Stanford, and it was new. It was, but people like Arthur Harris, along with others, were there, and these were top recruited players. So to me, that was kind of that sea change where Stanford was becoming the place where you can go in athletics if you wanted to be on really good teams. And from Southern California, it used to be you had to go to SC and UCLA, but that changed later. Anyway.
Well,
Top universities, and they were recruiting top athletes, and athletes they were recruiting all could make it academically. Art Harris came from Jordan High School in Watts, and he did quite well. I mean, so it was all kind of myth changing, myth destroying that went on, and I think that Black football players helped destroy that myth and helped open up the doors for a lot of people, because all these other students came in, they were just smart, they weren't necessarily athletes, they were just smart, and I loved them. I remember one time when I was like a sophomore or junior, they had a party off campus, and all these black kids were there boogieing, making noise and jumping around and yelling. And it was one of the best feelings I ever had. All these black people, we had a party, at a house party, and that never happened for the first 2 years I was there because we didn't have enough people to have a house party. So it was, that was an enjoyable thing. You could watch the change, you could feel the change, and you knew things were getting better and easier and more comfortable, and just overall better place to be.
Well, on that note, Al, I want to thank each of you for being our legacy builders and myth smashers as part of the legacy of Stanford football and Stanford University. And a huge, enormous thanks to Troy, who's given of his time to create this entire program with us today and provide the glue and the connectedness. And I want to say one thing before I turn it over to my colleague Julia, that we are actually, as evidenced by the robust conversation here, we had visions of, if we were all able to be in person today, we would be standing at the back of the room and on the sides and the aisles talking for another 90 minutes with each other. And so what we're doing, we've created, and Charlotte's going to post in the chat now, we've created a post-Zoom where it won't be a webinar, but you'll all be able to see each other and share stories that will not be recorded, that will not be censored amongst each other. So we invite any of you, particularly the former players, and we've kept a track of all the questions that you sent in, some of the personal stories. We'd love for you to share personally. So each of you will receive an email link to that, and Charlotte's going to post it as well. And with enormous thanks and joy in my heart, I'd like to now hand the panel over to Julia Hartung.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie, and thank you, Troy, Al, Hillary, and Jean. On behalf of the Stanford Historical Society, we thank you and for all of you who participated as attendees for taking the time to bring this to life, this fascinating chapter in Stanford's history. And thank you, Anne Marie, for moderating the Q&A. Thanks again to John Gifford for the great visuals. And thank you to Phil Satry for inspiring this program, for helping with recruiting our wonderful panelists, and for bringing the John Ralston Leadership Program to life. A quick shameless plug, we are not quite to our goal. And if any of you have been inspired to be part of this endowment that will forever honor Coach Ralston, please let me know. We'd love to have you part of it. So big thanks, most importantly, to all of you in our audience today for your participation, for your wonderful questions. And I hope we'll be able to continue and hear them answered in the post-Zoom. And a special thanks to our members. Hopefully we inspired a few of you to join. Your continued support makes what we do possible, and we're incredibly grateful. So again, we're a independent, volunteer-driven organization devoted to the scholarship and sharing of Stanford history. There's lots of great programs like this, and so please consider joining. It's not a heavy lift annually, and it's a lot of fun to come together around Stanford's amazing and varied and interesting history. So with that, thank you again, and we hope we'll see you at a future meeting, and we hope we'll see you in about a couple of minutes when we all come back on for a Zoom where we can actually see each other. Have a pleasant rest of your evening, and thank you again.